This is about how to make £100,000 in year one of property. And that's a huge number, right? That's a very impressive number. And I think it's fair to say that most people get involved in property are not as ambitious as to set that kind of number as their goal. And we're talking about how to make £100,000. So I'm not looking at this as a how to turn over £100,000. I'm looking at this as a profit exercise. So how can you make £100,000 worth of profit? Because it's dead easy to turn over £100,000, but to set up a business, especially in year one, that actually makes that £100,000, that's a completely different kettle of fish. So let's have a look at how we can go about achieving that. Now, I'll just give you a tiny little bit of information about Sourced and how if it's difficult and if most people don't make that amount of money in year one, then why are Sourced the right people to be speaking to you about this? We have over 200 franchisees around the country, right? And we advise, we help, we stand by these franchisees' sides in order to help them establish and build and scale their property businesses. This is exactly what we do. This is exactly what we're skilled at. This is what we've seen happen time and time again. So we can draw on all of that experience and all of the different characteristics that those people that are very successful bring to the table, and we can share it with you. Because then what you're doing is you're making an informed decision about whether this is the right path for you to take. Because let's be honest with each other, property isn't for everybody. If you haven't got the right skill set, if you haven't got the right mentality, if you haven't got the right mindset, it might not be the right choice for you. You might be far better suited to doing some passive investing that probably isn't going to return you as much money, but it suits you and your situation much better. So let's have a look at making £100,000 in year one, and let's see whether that is for you. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a question. So here is your question. How much experience do you have in property? I've put in investing, but I mean in property investing. So please have a look through those three answers and tell me now where you stand, because this is going to affect the way that I deliver this webinar and the things that we talk about on this webinar. And I just want to know exactly where you are and how I can best provide value for you today. So your options are: I have no experience, but I'm keen to learn. I have some experience, but want to scale up. And I have a decent sized portfolio, which I want to make more efficient. So I'll just leave it on here for a couple more minutes. I can see loads of people are taking part. Thank you very much for that. And let's see where we lie. Okay, so we've roughly got still some more coming in. We've roughly got a 2/3 to 1/3 split. So 1/3 of you guys that are listening to this at the moment have no experience, but you're keen to learn, and 2/3 of you have got some property experience, but you want to scale up. So I'm gonna finish that now. Thank you very much for taking part. Okay. So a decent number of people that are on this brand new, but the majority of you have got some experience and you want to learn more. Okay, so property investing. If we're setting, and I'm going to deal with this right at the end, okay, so let's just establish right now that our long-term goal from this webinar is to earn £100,000 in the first year of getting involved in property. What are the things that are holding you back? So what are the biggest hurdles that you have in achieving £100,000? Why isn't everybody that comes into property achieving this £100,000? And these are the five main issues that we see that people have when they come into property. First issue, a lack of strategy knowledge. So a basic lack of the understanding of what is possible in property. That is a big problem, because you could talk about what you tend to see is you tend to see lots of training companies who specifically talk about one strategy, one structure. For the last couple of years, the popular one has been serviced accommodation, and they'll hammer the living daylights out of it because, you know, that is the popular strategy. But what that doesn't do is that doesn't set you up for, you know, what if after a couple of months then legislation changes and you can't do serviced accommodation anymore? You know, what if you get to a point where serviced accommodation and the way that you've structured your serviced accommodation business just won't allow you to grow? For example, when you hit the VAT threshold, what are you going to do then? A lack of strategy knowledge is a real issue. So what we provide for our franchisees is all the strategies. So when somebody comes on board with Source, when somebody is part of our community, we give them all the strategy courses, access to every single one of them. Because it's really, really important that that strategy that you choose to focus on as your main source of income, especially in the first couple of years, suits you. It suits your situation. We're going to go through these questions that you need to ask yourself at the end. I've written them out for you. So you need to make sure that you are aware of all the strategies that are available and you've selected the right strategy for you. Number two, no business plan. So when you know that which strategy you're going to choose, how do you make the most of it? How do you make sure that you're going to make money? How are you going to structure your business? Where are you going to market your business? Where are you going to get, when do you monetize? So for example, when people think about property, the first thing that people tend to think about when you talk about property investing is building new homes and building estates of new homes. Now we're talking about making £100,000 in your first year of property investing. Now, if you're building new homes, the chances are that you're not going to do that within the first 12 months. Even if you specifically look to build new houses, first of all, you've got to find a site, then you've got to buy the site, then you've got to get planning permission if it hasn't got it already, and then you've got to actually construct the property. Now, by the time you've done that, you're going well beyond 12 months in most cases. So if our remit from this webinar is to make £100,000 in year one, you won't do that in year one if your focus is new build. So therefore, whichever strategy you choose, whether it be rent to rent, whether it be deal sourcing and selling those deals on, flips and refurbs, HMO, serviced accommodation, as in purchasing serviced accommodation, whatever that is, how are you going to get to that £100,000? Now, if you were starting any business, and I think property is pretty unique here, if you were starting any business, you would sit down at the start of creating that business and you would create a business plan. And that business plan would include a financial forecast, which tells you how much money, or it is a good guide as to what you should be achieving, both in terms of what you need to put into that project, to that business, and also what you're going to take out of that business. I think property is pretty unique because a lot of people that get started in property don't take that time at the beginning to sit down and really map out how they're going to achieve the numbers that they want to achieve. Now, we've made that part of our process when new people come on board with us. So they come on board with us, they go to induction. When they finish an induction, they sit down with their support person and they come up with a plan as to what they're going to do, how they're going to deliver, and how they're going to know exactly what they have to do. So therefore, that's mistake number two that we see people make, that they don't sit down and they can't articulate exactly what they're going to be doing and how they're going to be doing it. Number three of the issues that stops people from achieving this big goal, no investment capital. Now, do you need investment capital in order to achieve this goal? No, not necessarily. We have seen people do it without any. However, it makes it far easier if you have got some money to invest. And we'll come back to that in just a little while when we're talking about the strategies that we're going to choose. I just had a question come through actually, which is this webinar going to be recorded? Yes, it is. And a link to the recording will be sent to you probably tomorrow by a member of the Sourced team. Number four, lack of financing knowledge and availability. This is a big problem. This is a big problem that we see. People don't understand how finance works. People don't understand how finance works, and therefore they don't understand how to maximize it, how to make the most of that finance in order to achieve what they want to achieve. We go through a lot of education. In fact, one of our courses that we have created for our franchisees, for people in our community, is specifically about finance. It talks through each of the finance options. It shows how that type of finance calculates how much money they can give to you. It goes through the risk appetite of that type of finance, how you can mitigate for that, and how you can then use that to your advantage in order to present your deal in a way that enables you to borrow as much money as you possibly can from the finance company, which means that you need less money in your pocket. We're going to go through finance in just a little while. and then a lack of guidance and sense checking. And look, you could do all the education in the world, you could have all the information in the world in your head when it comes to property, and there's a huge amount to learn when it comes to property. We still learn every day. We've been in property for more than well over a decade, but we still learn every single day new stuff about property. But when it comes to making a decision, that's a whole different kettle of fish, because when it comes to making a decision, then you've got your emotions at play as well. And your emotions are so much more powerful than the rational side of your brain. And so it's very, very useful to have somebody by your side that understands as much, if not more, than you do, that is looking at the decisions that you're making and helping you to make sure that you're making the right decision and not an emotional decision. Because emotional decisions tend to be, or they've got a higher risk of being the wrong decision in the long term. So these are the 5 things. And also actually from number 5, the lack of guidance. What we see is people then will lose their confidence because they don't have somebody by their side. They might have the best deal in the world, but when they're looking at getting a deal and buying a deal, if it's the first one, and I did this for my first deal, I was questioning myself constantly whether it was the right thing to do. Where am I going to find tenants? How am I going to get this refurb done? I don't even know what I'm doing with the refurb, blah, 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 blah. But without somebody by your side saying, you know what, these numbers are good. You know what, the tenant demand in this area is really good. Let's have a look at the data. Let's have a look at the comparables for the purchase price that you're paying. You know, it's a good purchase price. Let's have a look at the GDV and the comparables for the GDV. Without somebody by your side that's walking you through all that sensible stuff that you would normally be doing to reassure yourself that you're making the right decision, we see a lot of people just let the opportunity go because they just don't have what it takes. They don't have the right processes to follow and the right person by their side in order to make a sensible decision. I just received another question, so let me just have a look at this. Can Source provide funding directly for projects rather than using outside bank funding? Yes, we have an in-house funder that is owned by Source. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. So they're the 5 issues that we see that people have when they first come on board, when they're trying to hit that £100,000 in the first year. What you're going to learn. So we're going to talk through the strategy choices in this webinar. We're going to be talking about how to plan your success, how you should go about that. We're going to be talking about funding and funding options and how the funding options are different. We're going to be talking about, and actually 3 and 4 should really be the other way around, because depending on your financing option, that'll determine how much money you need to put in for yourself. And then number 5, we're going to talk about the ways in which you can double check your own numbers to make sure that you're making a good long-term decision and you're mitigating for your risks involved in buying that property or starting that project. So these are the 5 things that we're going to learn on today's webinar, and all with the perspective of making £100,000 in your first year of being involved in property. So this is a project that was bought by one of our franchisees. So let's just have a quick look at this. So this is in Barrow, and this is a HMO conversion. These are the internal pictures once the HMO conversion has been done. He sourced this via Facebook because he started his Facebook and social media profile based on the training that he'd taken from us. It was a 4-bed house, turned it into a 6-bed HMO, valued 135, purchased it for less than that. The renovation was quite modest. The final valuation, so what we refer to as the GDV, was 200, so a really, really strong uplift there. Gross rent, 4 grand. Net income, and this is where we're interested at this webinar, net income, £2,000 per month. So £24,000 per year. Now, don't forget, am I gonna confuse you if I say this now? Maybe, maybe not. Don't forget, he could have also released some cash, released some profit when he took out that mortgage to refinance. Because if that mortgage to refinance was £200,000 and he was able to borrow 75% of that, then he'd have been able to borrow £150,000 from a standard HMO mortgage. Now, if he's borrowed £135,000, sorry, if he's borrowed £150,000 and he's spent 112 plus 30, then he could have potentially put some money in his own pocket at that point as well. So he could have made about 30 grand in the first year of operating. In that one deal alone, he could have made about 30 grand from this property. But that is, I'm sure there's some of you that are sitting at home thinking, but that depends on whether he's filled the property straight away. Absolutely, that's relying on 100% occupancy. But £24,000 rental income in his per annum for that property. So therefore, you've got to be thinking, right? If I want to make £100,000, then why don't I just do 4 of them? Because if you've got 4 of them, and that's making you £24,000 per year, a little bit more in the first year because you've refinanced and released some cash, then that's your £100,000 covered, right? And that's where a lot of people, when they look at property strategies, get it wrong, because they think that property strategies, you have to go for the big guns, because to you, £100,000 might be a very significant amount of money. Look, it is to me as well. Of course it is. But when it comes to property, you don't have to go after commercial conversions or new build or planning gain. You don't have to go after the big stuff in order to hit the numbers. And in fact, we are going to talk about how you can achieve £100,000 from pretty much any of the property strategies, including deal sourcing and selling it on. But we'll get to that in just a minute. Oh, and this one, to answer your question, whoever just asked it, sorry, I can't remember the name. This was funded by Source. So our in-house funder, Source Capital, funded this project for this franchisee. This is another one. Again, this is a HMO, but a completely different one, because this is also a commercial conversion. This was a care home and it was turned into a HMO, 24-bed HMO. All the figures are in front of you. The net income for this one, £6,000 per month. Now, £6,000 per month is £72,000 per year. Now, actually, if you take this one and you take the previous one and you add them together, just from those 2 projects, the rental income alone is £96,000. So if you're also releasing on refinance a little bit of money, then you're going to be significantly over that £100,000 for the first 12 months of operating. Now, the one problem in that is that this is a much bigger conversion project, and so this wasn't complete within 12 months. So we wouldn't qualify for hitting that £100,000 threshold in the first 12 months, because this took a lot longer to convert. So what we're learning from that is, as I said to you before, the bigger projects, you're not going to turn them around very, very quickly. You have to look at the smaller projects that have got a much shorter turnaround time in order to qualify to get to that profit level within the first 12 months. Just got another question coming through. Okay, have the regulatory requirements for HMOs now become a lot more difficult? It's a very subjective question, that. A lot more difficult to what? To before 2018, when the licensing rules came in? Not really. In fact, in the last 12 to 24 months, the requirements for operating a HMO haven't significantly changed. Serviced accommodation has received a lot of attention, especially from the Conservative government before Labour won the general election. And the Conservatives seem to be specifically focusing on serviced accommodation and going after serviced accommodation. Now that Labour have come in, both HMOs and serviced accommodation, they haven't really talked about. So no, not really. HMOs are still as easy to run or as difficult to run, depending on what your perspective is, as they have been since 2018. There's been no significant legislation changes since then. Okay, so that's Hadley. So who am I? Why am I talking to you? My name is Chris Kirkwood. I'm the managing director of the Source Group. I founded, I've run, and I've grown multiple businesses, and founded from the point of absolute nothing. So I've started businesses from scratch, just exactly like we're talking to you about today, with building a business and making money from it from the first year. I've been involved in thousands and thousands and thousands of property projects, from 55 grand to 150 million. I've executed pretty much, name a property strategy. I think I've done or had involvement in every single property strategy that is out there. And now I manage the direction and the drive and the progression of the Sourced group, as well as the fantastic team that work here at Sourced HQ. Just got another question. Sachin, thanks. No problem. Lots of communication on the Q&A. And am I right in saying, yeah, nothing on the chat yet? So thanks very much for sticking to that rule. Adjust on the laser to, okay, so I've got another question in. Just on the latest 2 examples, can you indicate turnaround time for each project? Yeah, so 18 months roughly for Hadley and about 3 months for the previous one, which is the smaller HMO conversion from a 4-bedroom house into a 6-bedroom HMO. Okay, so how to earn £100,000 in your first year in property. So these are the most popular strategies, okay? This is just a bit of a brain dump that I went through a couple of days ago. These are the most popular strategies. So deal sourcing and trading it on. Rent to rent and rent to rent. The 2 main strategies that you use with rent to rent are HMO or serviced accommodation, title splits, buy to let, flips and refurbs, lease options, HMO and serviced accommodation from the perspective of buying HMOs or serviced accommodation. And then you've got commercial conversions, planning gain and new build. So these are the most popular property strategies. Now, if we're going to make £100,000 in the first 12 months, we're going to squeeze this list from both ends. So some of this list is not going to produce you profit levels that are high enough to comfortably make that money within the first 12 months. Now, people have done it, but I think your chance of succeeding is not high enough to qualify for this webinar. And then looking at the bottom of the list, like I talked to you about earlier, some of the strategies are going to take too long to execute. So you're not going to fit within the first 12 months. So we're going to squeeze this list from both sides. Deal sourcing. Let's look at that as the first example. Now, let's say that you make £5,000 per property that you sell on to somebody else. So deal sourcing is you finding the deal and you selling that deal to an investor. And that investor pays you a premium, let's say £5,000, for you to hand over the purchase of that property to them. So now that investor buys the property and they execute the strategy and they make the money from it. So you found that deal and you've sold it to somebody else for £5,000. Now, obviously, to reach £100,000 in your first 12 months, that's going to take you to sell 20 of those deals to hit £100,000. Now, I don't think that enough people, if 100 people tried this strategy, I think fewer than 30 of those people, if they're not part of the Sourced group and they don't have access to our contracts and they don't have access to our process, I think fewer than 30 people would actually succeed at that. And therefore, I'm not going to put this in this list, because some of the things that we've set up, not only have we got contracts in place, we've built an app to help our franchisees find investors. Now, if you're not going to be part of Sourced, then you don't have all of that facility. So I think that really reduces the amount of people that will succeed at making £100,000 from deal sourcing. So I'm not going to include deal sourcing. I think we're going to discount that as an opportunity. Rent to rent. That specifically relies on rental income, rent to rent. And therefore, I'm going to discount rent to rent as well, because the amount of profit that you make from rent to rent typically is lower than if you purchase the property. Now, it means that by being the rent to renter, you usually require less money in your own pocket to get a deal across the line. However, you're looking at years 2, 3, and 4 of that rent to rent contract that you're really making the big money. Year 1 is about setup and recovering your costs. So you'd normally take about between 8 and 9 months to recover your costs, which really means that you're only making profit for 3 months of the first year. So we're not going to make enough money. We're not going to get enough rent to rent properties on board in order to hit that £100,000 in year 1. Title splits, I'm leaving there because that is a good opportunity. Buy to let, again, you're talking about fairly low, fairly modest rental income there. You know, buy to let, you're lucky if you're hitting 10% as a return for buy to let. So again, we're just not going to be making the big numbers in order to make buy to let work. Flips and refurbs, I'm going to leave that there as well. Lease options typically relies on rental income too, so I'm going to discount lease options. And again, the rental income for the HMOs and for the serviced accommodation, I'm not going to count them because you're setting up a brand new business when you're setting up HMO and serviced accommodation. And in that first year, you're about establishing yourself. It's years 2, 3, and 4 that you start making the profit. So we're going to discount HMO and serviced accommodation. And then coming to the last 3, commercial conversion, planning gain, and new build, they just take too long. They're going to take too long for you to execute, for you to really hit those numbers in the first 12 months. So the 2 that we're left with are title splits and flips and refurbs. Now, I've just had another question through, so let's just read that. In practice, how do the mechanics of crisply handing over a deal look? i.e., what do they get for the fee? That's a good question, Glenn. It's not really for this webinar. We've done deal sourcing webinars previously, so maybe a good idea would be to go to our YouTube page and look at the previous webinars that are specifically for that topic, where we're talking about the mechanics of how deal sourcing works and the stuff that we have in place, which you can replicate. You can replicate if you want to go and pay for solicitor to draw up contracts for you. You can do exactly what we do, and you can have exactly the same process, and we talk you through that. So I'll leave that to you to go and do from YouTube, but it's not really relevant for this for the purpose of this webinar. So these are the 2 strategies that we've got: title splits and flips and refurbs. They're the 2 that are the most likely out of that entire list to be able to execute in a timely fashion. So we're going to be able to do it within 12 months and also have got a decent amount of return that we're going to make in order to hit that £100,000 threshold. So that's what we're going to focus on. So just to explain what these 2 strategies are so that we all are operating from the same page. A title split is finding a property where that entire property is for sale as one unit. So in jargon, property speech, it's on one title. There is one title that covers that entire property. But previously, a landlord or the owner of that property has split it into flats. And this used to be the strategy before HMOs were a thing. So we're talking about years and years and years ago, probably over 20 years ago. Over 20 years ago, before, when HMOs were just for students and the HMO market hadn't really been explored, what landlords would do is they'd buy a big Victorian house because they've got big proportions and high ceilings, and they'd split them into flats. Because from that big Victorian house, they might have achieved £2,000 worth of rental income. But from each one of the flats, they might get 750 quid. So therefore, operate it as one house, get £2,000. Operate it as 4 flats, get £3,000. No brainer, right? So this is what landlords would do, but they wouldn't want to go through planning, because you do have to go through planning in order to split one title into multiple titles. They don't want to go through planning, so they just do it without telling the planning office. But what that means is when it comes to the time to sell, they have to sell it as one property. They can't sell it as individual flats because all those flats are on one title. I hope that makes sense. So if we look at the numbers, the purchase price that you might pay for this title split opportunity, which has previously, years and years ago, been split into flats. I wasn't just speaking to myself in my office, which would have looked a little bit crazy. But yeah, I think we just lost each other. It's probably because of our Wi-Fi that we have in the office. So let me just catch up. Your screen has gone blank. Yeah, hopefully you're back now. No sound. Yeah, hopefully you're back now. So if you could just put in the Q&A section, just let me know that you're back. That would be really helpful and that you can hear me. So just a yes or a thumbs up or something like that. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me just get rid of these questions so I can see all the new ones that come through. Yeah, great. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So I saw when the screen went, but I'm not sure at what point that I lost you during that explanation. So let me just start this part of the slide again. So we're looking at this title split. So let's say that this is the wrong slide. Let me go back. There we go. So the purchase price is £1 million. The GDV of each one of those flats is 1.4 million quid, the cost to title split, and then the net profit is calculated by the difference between the GDV, which is 1.4 million, and the purchase price, which is £1 million, and then you take off all your costs. So roughly in this case, using these numbers, your profit margin would be about £200,000. Now, the great thing about title splits as well is that they're fairly quick, right? So you could find a title split that has got absolutely zero requirement for any work that needs to be done because the flats are all in tip-top condition. But you know what people do is they just don't understand, right? So a landlord would sell an opportunity like this because they don't understand how easy it can be to get that property split on paper, because they might have been the one that 10 or 15 years ago decided to not go through planning, and they think that planning is required in order to get this property to the point where the flats can be sold individually. But you and me know that actually full planning isn't the route that you would take on this. You would use something called a certificate of lawful use. And we know that because we've done our homework. We know our strategies. We know what's involved in property. The first thing that we've done is research, and we know what we're talking about. So title splits are an opportunity for you. Now, I've used some fairly generous numbers here when it comes to the purchase price and the GDV. But even if you scale that down, if you look at much smaller opportunities, you know, because of that speed of turnaround, because you can get these properties on board and across the line fairly quickly, then instead of hitting that threshold of £100,000 with just one that we would do with this deal, you could do 3 or you could do 4 of those deals in your first year. And if you're making 25 to 30 grand from each one of those deals, then all of a sudden you've hit that £100,000 threshold fairly easily. Now you've done that as well, and you've mitigated your risk, because instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, you've put your eggs across 4 baskets. So even if one of those deals doesn't come off because it's taken longer to get across the line, you're still going to make 75, 90,000 pounds in your first year, which is a very sensible way of doing it. Just getting you guys are asking a lot of questions today, which I'm very pleased about because I like answering questions. What represents a good property type for a title split? A good property type. Andy, I think you're asking the wrong question. I don't think that's the question that you really want to know the answer for. I think the question that you want to know the answer for is, how do you find title splits, right? Because the property type, let's be honest, do you really care what the property type is? What you care about is being able to find the property that has been set up like this, that allows you to make that amount of money, right? I think that's, yeah, okay, you've just confirmed, yes. So there's actually a way that you can do this just by using Rightmove. And Rightmove will show you the title split opportunities that are out there. They will show you houses that are for sale as one house, but they've been split into flats and apartments. And there's a way that you can do that just using the bog standard Rightmove stuff. And again, this comes down to the same thing of understanding what's out there and understanding what your options are. And that's exactly what we teach in the title split course. Which date is this data? I don't understand that question, I'm sorry. Okay, so if you imagine Rightmove in front of you, and you go to the top and you select the house types that you want to purchase, right? You'd put in detached, semi-detached, and terraced. Okay, so you're only looking for either detached homes, semi-detached homes, or terraced houses. You're not looking for land, you're not looking for flats, you're not looking for apartments. You're looking for houses that are for sale. And then if you go a little bit lower on Rightmove and you go to the keyword section, and you type into the keyword section houses as one keyword, sorry, that's wrong. Into the first keyword, if you type flats, and into the second keyword, because you get 3 keywords on Rightmove that you can use, apartments. Now, what that's going to do is it's only going to look at whole houses that are for sale, but in that advert, the adverts that show you, or the adverts that contain the words flats or apartments, will appear at the top of your list. Now, why on earth would somebody list a house, a full detached house for sale, just as a normal bog standard house and put the word flats or apartments in the listing unless that property had been split into flats or apartments? Because that's how the estate agent will list it if it has been split in the previously by the landlord, by the owner, but it's for sale as one title, and that's how you find them. Does the purchase price include the cost of buying, stamp duty, etc.? Sachin, I've included that in when I've calculated the profit. So as you can see, it's got £400,000 worth of profit. The cost to split is £50,000, which leaves £350,000 worth of profit. But I've said that the profit is £200,000. So I've taken out another £150,000 from the profit in order to cover the cost of buying and the stamp duty and etc. Okay, so that's how I've done it. What about capital gains tax impact on selling? Well, your capital gains tax is about your tax. Okay, so I can't make this relevant for every single person, and I don't know what allowances every single person has that's looking at this. So out of that £200,000, you would have to take out whatever additional tax liabilities that you have based on your overall tax exposure. So I can't calculate that and make it relevant to absolutely everybody. So that's title splits. So that's what a title split is. Now, you might have heard of title splits before, but that's how they operate, and that's how the better title splits and the sort of truest version of what a title split is works. Now, the other strategy that we identified as the best option for moving forward with making £100,000 in year one is flips and refurbs. So buying a house, doing it up, selling it on. So in this one, we're using much more modest figures. So the purchase price for this one, £150,000, refurbishment, £30,000. And we just saw that HMO got converted for £30,000. So we know that that's a realistic number, especially for a house that costs 150 grand, because you're probably looking at 80 to 100 square meters on for that kind of purchase price. GDV 230, and the profit is circa £25,000. So again, I've taken the costs of buying and all of those additional purchase costs and costs throughout on top of the purchase price and on top of the refurbishment amount from the profit. So a flip, just a bog standard flip. What our head underwriter, the commercial director here at Source Capital, Derek Pratt, called a tart and turn. So you're tarting it up and you're turning it onto the next person that's going to buy it. So this is going to create £25,000 worth of profit. And you know what? Does that hit your £100,000 threshold? Nope. However, if you find 4 of these deals and you have the deals going on at the same time, then you have found properties that you can that will get you across that line. You'll be able to do it within 12 months, and you'll hit the £100,000 amount of profit that we're looking for from this webinar. So there you go. You're taking that small house that's got no windows, just got a door, and you're turning it into something much more grand, much bigger, a much bigger property, and that's how you're getting your value add, and that's what you're generating your profit from. So let's have a look at planning your success. So let's have a look at either one of these deals. It doesn't really matter. Let's assume that whether you've created flats or whether you've created a bigger property in the flip, that it's going to take you 3 months to sell that property. So if we want to get this across the line in your first 12 months of operating, then we need to work backwards. So from month 12, if it's going to take us 3 months to sell, that means that we have to have it on the market at month 9. And if we have it on the market at month 9, that means that we need 2 months to refurbish the property. So we need to start the refurbishment of that property in month 7. Now it's going to take us 3 months to purchase it as well. So from month 7, if we take off 3 months, that means that we need to find all 4 of these properties in the first 4 months, because by the end of month 4, we need to start purchasing in order to get us to month 7, where we start refurbishing, in order to get us to month 9, where we need to start selling them to hit that £100,000 within 12 months. However, again, because you and I both know what we're talking about, and we both know how to get the most out of property, then what we can do is we can sort of squash those figures together. So it is going to take 3 months to sell, but you could start listing the property before you finish the refurbishment, because some people are going to express their interest with you before you've even finished. It's called selling off plan. So you could start listing the properties before you've finished the projects. You could also start the refurbishment while you're going through the purchase conveyancing process. So instead of waiting for completion before you start the refurbishment, you could talk to the owner of the property and request them from exchange of contracts. If you can have access to the property to do it up, then they might be willing to let you do that. So instead of this whole process taking three months plus 2 months plus 3 months, which is 8 months, that means you can squash it down to maybe take you 6 months instead of 8 months. So what that means is that gives you a margin of error at the end. So instead of having to get these properties across the line and that taking you all the way up to 12 months, you can potentially get these properties sold before that. And if they take a little bit longer than you were expecting, then you can still come in within the 12-month process. It's all about knowing what your options are and what is possible within property, and not just blindly following what other people have done before, because that might not do it for you. So therefore, let's be conservative about this and say that it's going to take you 6 months to buy it, refurbish it, and sell it on, because you're overlapping all of those 3 processes. So that leaves you 6 months to find just 4 properties. That's it. That's all you got to do. And each one of those 4 properties has got to be a flip opportunity or a title split. 6 months. I mean, I would back myself to find opportunities like that within the next 6 days and find 4 of them, because I know how to do it, and that's what our training is based on, and that's what we teach other people to do. So to give you 6 months to do it, I think it's just a no-brainer. You're absolutely going to be able to find the right deals. But how do you find the right deal? Where do you go? What can you do, especially if you're not part of our network, part of our community, and you don't have access to our training? Well, really, your method depends on your skill set. Your method, you might be fantastic at talking to people. You might be a real people person, or you might not. You might love your numbers and love your spreadsheets, and really, you're not great at negotiating. You don't have a huge amount of confidence. So the way that those 2 people would go about finding their properties would be completely different. We had a franchisee. We still have a franchisee who's called Sandy, and she came on board with us. And I remember the day that she came into our office at HQ, and after 6 months, when she started her franchise, she came into the office and she said, "Look, I'm just not getting anything. I can't find anything." So we sat her down, a support person, me and Sandy, all sat down, and we looked at everything that she'd done. And she basically hadn't followed our process. She hadn't done what we asked her to do. And it fell down at the point where she was finding deals online, but then she wasn't having conversations with estate agents. So we asked her, said, this is clearly where the problem is. So talk us through your decision making. Why are you doing what you're doing instead of doing what we're telling you to do? And it came down to confidence. It came down to, she didn't want to have those conversations. So what we did, we ran through some role plays with her. We went through like her worst possible scenario of going to talk to an estate agent. We got that demon out of the way. And then she committed herself in the next couple of months, the next 3 months, to following our process exactly. And it took her 2.5 months to find the first project that she bought, that she put through Source Capital, that we funded for her, that she made profit on. And that's how effective this can be. Just getting another question. This is quite a long one, so bear with me. But assuming you're using bridging finance on a £150,000 purchase price, you need 50k of your own money. I'm working on these figures right now, and you can't do it for less. So to do 4, you'd need 200k of your own money, which defeats the purpose. Absolutely incorrect, right? Now, I am not saying that you're not correct in the numbers that you're presenting to me for the deal that you're looking at, but you don't have to buy that deal. I'm going to explain why in just a minute, so just bear with me. So you walk into an estate agent, and this is what Sandra did. She walked into an estate agent. She started having those conversations. It took her 2.5 months in order to find the first deal that she put in, right? But now she's already built that relationship with the estate agent. So to get the next project presented to her from that estate agent took an extra couple of weeks, because now she's built that relationship. She's got the credibility with that estate agent. So therefore, planning your success. This is how we're going to work it backwards. But now you have 6 months to find those 4 deals. So, sorry, you put your name was anonymous on the thingy, so I don't know who I'm talking to. However, let's use that as an example, right? So your scenario, just go to the answered questions. So your scenario is that you're buying a property for £150,000. You need £50,000 of your own money. Now, there's a reason that you need £50,000 of your own money, and that's because your lender isn't lending you more than, what is it, 66%. Right, so your lender is lending you 66% of the value of the property, or the purchase price of the property, I'm not sure. Now, there are lenders out there that will lend you 70% of the value regardless of what you're buying it for. Right, I know this because I'm sitting in the same building on the same floor as a lender that does exactly that. There's a lender sitting behind me that will lend you up to 70% of the value of the property, not the purchase price. So let me explain how effective that can be. And in fact, I think this is the next slide. Here we go, finance. So bridging can lend you. There are bridging companies out there, and bridging is unregulated, right? So bridging can their terms and conditions can be completely different. They can offer whatever they want. There's bridging companies out there that will say, whatever you're buying the property for, we'll give you 70%. But there are also bridging companies out there that will say, whatever the value of the property is, we'll give you 70%. So let's look at the difference in those two words of value and purchase. Because if you're buying a property for £70,000, but the property is worth £100,000, so you've negotiated your margin, then you could borrow, then the 70% of the value is £70,000. So you could borrow all of that purchase in order to fund that deal. Now, what bridging companies will then do, and I'm sure this is a follow-up question from you because you'll have received your agreement in principle, whoever it is that wrote that question. What bridging companies then do is they calculate the interest that they'll generate through the term, and they'll take that off your day one, right? So if they're going to generate £16,000 worth of interest from you, they'll take that off the £70,000 that they're going to give you. So now all of a sudden you're borrowing £54,000 and not 70. So you need to find that £16,000, and that's why you're talking about how much money you need in your own pocket. Source Capital doesn't do that. In fact, for the first deal that our franchisees do, we don't charge them anything up front. So if we're going to lend them 70% of their value on day one, we'll give them 70% of the money on day one. We'll give them 100% of the 70%, if you see what I mean. That's what we do, because we're here to help and support and assist our franchisees at being profitable and building a successful business. And we're not the only bridging company that do that. I'm using Source Capital as the example because I know that that's what they do, because these are the conversations that Capital have. And in fact, they sit in front of me. So I listen to them. I watch them have these conversations every single day with franchisees. But that isn't the only option for bridging. Some bridging companies will offer you 70% of what you're buying it for, not the day one value. Some bridging companies will take that interest calculation off you on day one and won't let you roll it over to the end, right? So from one bridging company to the next, you're going to get different deals. So on that £150,000 purchase that you're looking at the moment, then you go to a different bridging company, you come to Source Capital, for example, the amount of money that you need in your pocket to purchase that deal will be completely different from the bridging company that you're looking at right now. And this is what I mean about understanding finance, because we've got different types of finance here. We've got bridging, we've got peer-to-peer, which is Source Capital, because what we do is generally different from most other bridging companies, and that's short-term finance. And then you've got long-term finance, like a mortgage or like a HMO mortgage or like a commercial mortgage. And they're all calculated in different ways. So understanding the difference between those calculations is really, really important. But even from one bridging company to the next, what you actually get in your agreement in principle and what they will lend you can be completely different. So understanding what is possible out there can really increase your chances of being able to hit those income targets. And that's, I say that with all confidence because we are incredibly experienced at that kind of thing. We have a bridging company within our building. As in, we have our own bridging company within our building. We know the terms and conditions. We know how they operate. We know how we compare against other bridging companies. But also, we've got a fantastic support team and training system, which allows the franchisees to come on, to learn, to make sensible decisions, to create a plan that they're going to be able to execute, and then to follow that plan with the help of their support person to then make the income figures that they're looking to make. Now, one thing that I have to say that you have to realize is that this plan for making £100,000 in your first 12 months, it sounds great, right? Because who doesn't want to be profitable as soon as possible? Everybody does. However, this might not be the right plan for you, because your plan and the plan that we would help you create needs to include your experience and your skill set and how much money you've got and what your long-term goal is, because this might be completely different from your long-term goal. Where you are in 12 months might be sort of irrelevant to you. You might be much more interested in where you're going to be in 10 years' time, because you want to retire early and you want that to fund your early retirement. And that then looks into your purpose and what you're trying to achieve. And, do you want to spend more time with your family, or are you absolutely committed to making this work? And so you'll put every waking moment into it. And what is your availability? The minimum requirement that we have is 2 days per week. But can you put 4 days a week into it? Because the people that put 4 days a week into it are probably going to have double the results as the people that put 2 days a week into it. So we look at all of that together, and your support person in you will help you create the plan that you need to follow to maximize what you're bringing to the table, and how we've seen people perform that are bringing something similar to the table as you are over the long period of time. Here are some of the success stories that we've had, though, from our franchise network over the years. So I don't think I said this, but we're 7 years old now, so we've had a lot of experience at helping out franchisees. This is Shahid. Shahid only sells deals, deal sourcing, rent-to-rent deals specialist. He'll sell 10 to 20 deals every single month. Like I said, about £5,000 per deal. So Shahid is making over £100,000 per year just from deal sourcing. Now, the reason that we didn't include that in the first 12 months is that he's extremely well established at this. He's got a very well trained network of investors that we've helped him build, that know exactly how to buy deals off Shahid. He secures, he goes directly to developers. He secures multiple units in one go, based on the training that we've given him and the doors that we've helped him open. This is Phil. Phil bought a tartan turn. He bought something that's in Scotland. He made £40,000 profit from his first deal. Simple. Bought it, did it up, sold it really quick. Just to show you that this is the kind of, we have multiple franchisees that do this kind of thing. And this is why this is one of the best options for making huge amounts of money fairly quickly. Residential conversion, big profit margins. Again, the reason that we didn't look at this one is because it took him more than 12 months to go from beginning to end. But this is a development that we funded for this franchisee. He's now secured a project of 22 new build houses. So he did the first one, which was one new build house, and now he's on to 22. So he's building an estate instead of just building the odd one. This is a commercial conversion project from Chris. Again, this took more than 12 months, which is why we didn't include this strategy. But I think this is an important part of, if your year one looks like you're targeting to make £100,000, you're going to use flips in order to do that, or title splits, then where do you go after that? Well, then you scale up to something like commercial to residential conversion or new builds, and you do the training courses and you learn all about it. And now you've got experience because you've done 4 flips. And now you can buy your first commercial building, which might be a smaller commercial building, but you're going to convert that into 5 flats. And then you do another one for 15 flats, and you do another one for 30 flats. You gradually scale up, and the profit margins might stay the same. But now, because you're dealing with bigger units that cost more money, that have a much higher GDV, you're making more profit because there are more zeros involved in each and every deal. And this is Nigel. This is a HMO conversion that Nigel did down south in England. 6 bed. He now rents that out to the NHS. He doesn't put any time into managing it whatsoever and doesn't have any costs in managing it because it's an FRI lease with the NHS. We're getting on a bit, so I'm going to skip that second poll. But this is the what's the word I'm looking for? The blueprint that the training takes. We have 6 steps to success, and all of our training courses take the same route. And hopefully you'll have seen that we've made some really quick decisions based on stuff because, for example, with planning, because we know what we're talking about. And each one of our courses, the first thing that people need to do is research to understand what they're talking about and understand what's driving their decision making. So that's the first part of every course that we run, research and understanding the strategy and understanding what's involved in the strategy. Then we start finding the properties. When we know that we've got the ability to make fast decisions, then we start to find the properties. And then we can secure the properties, which depending on the strategy will happen in a number of different ways. Then we can structure the deal to make sure that it's maximizing the amount of money that we can make from it. Then we look at the works and how we can mitigate risk during the works, and keep our costs manageable. And then we look at the exit and how we're going to make our money, because we don't tend to make our money, especially on bigger deals, until the end, right? When people are paying us to buy those flats, or when we're refinancing the unit. That's when we get paid. That's when we make our money. And so we need to make sure that we're thinking about that from day one. Now, if you were going to do this on your own, which I dare say that some of you are doing, to set up yourself as a business, marketing, branding, website, startup training, I'm sure we've talked about things today, even if it's just the way that you use Rightmove, I'm sure we've talked about things today that you weren't aware of, right? And that's why training is extremely important. We just had training going on today for supported living. And it's one of our franchisees that we've paid to come in to train all of our other franchisees, because she is an absolute expert at supported living. So as soon as new opportunities come up, we jump on that. We make sure that we're providing that training and that support for our franchisees. And of course, because they're part of our network already, that training doesn't cost them anything, because they've come on board with us and our community. You need to look after your salary for at least a few months while you start making money from property. And then you might need some investment capital, which if you don't do the training, and hopefully I've shown you here when we've been talking about the financing, that if you're not doing training and you're not absolutely aware of what your options are, especially with funding, it basically means you're going to need more money in your pocket. And then the ongoing costs of running a property business means that you're going to need property leads, investor leads. You're going to need systems that you need to pay for. Marketing, you might use a consultant to bounce ideas from. Funding applications, this always blows my mind. If you go through some funders, they charge you just to make an application. We don't at Source. To go through Source Capital, there is no application fee. Then you're going to need to keep on with your training events. You're going to need to go to networking and run your own networking events potentially. And then you need to pay for documents and contracts. I just gave away a rent-to-rent contract to somebody this morning, which cost me £2,000 about 5 years ago to draw up. But we gave it to one of our franchisees because we have all of that kind of facility available. It's going to cost you about £5 grand a month to keep on top of all of that stuff. At Sourced, if you want training, if you want support, you might go to a trainer. That's going to cost you about 25 grand a year, something like that. You might want unlimited support, at which point you would go to a mentor, which is going to cost you 500, 600 pounds a month. I used to do that as well before I started Sourced. I used to be a mentor, and I would charge people 500 pounds a month, and that was 7 years ago, right? So I dare say it's even more expensive now. If you want leads, you can go to lead generation companies. They're going to cost you about 50 quid each. If you want to sell a deal, you're going to have to go to an estate agent. That's going to cost you at least 1%. Here we have our property app that our franchisees can advertise their deals on for no additional charge. Funding, if you need funding, you're going to go to a lender. If you want an agreement in principle, you're going to go to a lender. You're probably going to get a low loan to value. So just like the example that the person put on, they're getting 66% of the purchase price as the LTV, whereas we would give 70% of the value, not the purchase price, as the loan to value. If you want an agreement in principle or you want a joint venture, you'd go to a joint venture partner. We can offer all of these things. It's all included in the package, and that package would cost £10,000 plus VAT for 5 years. That's a one-off payment for 5 years to give you access to all of that package, and then 315 plus VAT per month to keep all of those, all of that facility open to you. So I hope this webinar has helped you see what your options are, and also, identified areas in which you need to improve. Because, I think one of the things that I'm particularly proud of, or that I like seeing, is when people think, you know what, I shouldn't buy that property first. I should do some training first. I should go and do this first. I need to find out about this. And then when I've done that, I'll come back and I'll take my first step forward. Because sometimes not buying the property is the right option. Because buying the property means that you're absolutely committed. And sometimes that's not the right thing to do until you're well versed and you know exactly what you're getting into. And that's exactly what we do here at Source. That's why we have a 5-year agreement to make sure that you're set up correctly and to make sure that you're making the right decision from day one. So if you've got any questions at all, if you email sam.clayton@source.co, and I dare say that some of you have spoken to Sam already, but Sam will be able to help you out with any questions about our package, with any questions about coming on board, what's available to you and how we deliver it. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you spending your Thursday afternoon with me. And please let us know if you've got any questions at all, make sure that you contact Sam. But thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Cheers.